My name is Michaela Bennett. I'm 33 years old. And 12 hours before my entire relationship with my sister quietly collapsed, I was gripping the steering wheel of my car somewhere outside of Redding, California, trying not to let exhaustion blur my vision. The highway lights streaked past like thin white scars in the darkness. My lower back ached. My jaw was tight from clenching it for hours. And on the passenger seat beside me sat a burgundy velvet case I'd checked at least a dozen times during the drive, as if it might vanish if I stopped looking at it. Inside was my grandmother's diamond and emerald bracelet. It wasn't just jewelry. It was history, survival, legacy. It had crossed borders, tucked inside coat linings. It had survived my grandmother's divorce, my mother's single-parent years, and more family fractures than I cared to count. It was meant to be worn on Victoria's wedding day, my gift to my baby sister, the ultimate symbol of I choose you. I'd emptied my checking account for her, again. The custom wedding gown from a boutique in Pioneer Square, the waterfront venue overlooking Puget Sound, the photographer who charged more than my monthly rent, every wire transfer, every credit card swipe. I told myself it was worth it. Victoria was my little sister, and this was her moment. We used to be inseparable. Growing up in Phoenix, summer nights meant sneaking onto the roof of our childhood home, legs dangling over the edge, skin still warm from the desert sun. We'd talk about everything: dreams, escapes, futures that felt impossibly far away. No matter what happens, Victoria used to say, linking her pinky with mine, we've got each other. I believed her. But over the past year, something had shifted. Her calls got shorter. Her texts felt transactional, polite, efficient, like she was checking me off a list. Still, I buried the discomfort, told myself wedding planning was stressful, told myself I was imagining things. I'd always been the emotional one, the fixer, the older sister who worried too much. By the time I pulled into the Fairmont Olympic Hotel parking garage, the dashboard clock read 6:47 p.m. My heart was pounding with anticipation. I rehearsed my speech in my head as I stepped out of the car. I'm so proud of you. You're going to be a beautiful bride. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed my blazer, picked up the velvet case, and headed inside. The lobby glittered. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, jazz music floating softly through the air. Guests in tailored suits and silk dresses laughed over champagne flutes. This was it. I followed the signs toward the grand ballroom, the location Victoria had told me was hosting her rehearsal dinner. But then my steps slowed. The signage didn't say Bennett Walsh rehearsal dinner. It read, Morrison and Chong celebration. My mouth went dry. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling, and called her. It rang 4 times. Hey, Mac, Victoria answered, distracted. I'm here, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. At the Fairmont. Where's the rehearsal dinner? The pause on the other end felt endless. Oh, she said finally, her tone shifting, cooler, detached. We had it yesterday. Yesterday. What? I whispered. Just immediate family, she added casually. You know how it is. The words landed like a blow to my chest. Immediate family. I stood there, surrounded by strangers, celebrating someone else's joy, while something precious cracked open inside me. Victoria, I said quietly, I paid for your entire wedding. I drove 12 hours. Yeah, Mac, she replied, irritation slipping in. It was small, just parents and Trevor's brother. Not me. I wasn't immediate family. I have Grandma's bracelet for you, I said, my voice barely holding together. That's sweet, she replied. Maybe drop it by the hotel room tomorrow. I've got to go. The line went dead. I stood frozen in that glittering lobby, clutching a velvet box worth more than my car, while laughter echoed around me. A hotel employee approached gently. Ma'am, can I help you find an event? Is there a Bennett rehearsal dinner tonight? I asked. He checked his tablet. No, ma'am, just the Morrison party. No mistake. No misunderstanding. She had excluded me on purpose. I walked back to my car like a ghost, each step heavier than the last. When I finally sat behind the wheel, the silence pressed in. Something inside me didn't shatter. It clarified. Victoria had drawn a line, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. The drive back to Phoenix took 14 hours. I barely remember it. And by the time I unlocked my apartment door, I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed, fully dressed, shoes kicked off somewhere near the door, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling that ran from the smoke detector to the window frame. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic drifting in through the open window. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hotel lobby again. The chandeliers, the laughter, Victoria's voice saying, "Just immediate family." By 3:02 a.m., I gave up on pretending rest was coming. I padded into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of tap water I barely tasted, and opened my laptop at the small dining table I'd bought secondhand years ago. The wood was scratched, uneven. Nothing like the polished furniture Victoria had recently started posting on Instagram. I logged into the joint account, the one we'd opened just for wedding expenses. I wasn't expecting to feel better once I saw the numbers. I just needed clarity. Proof that I hadn't imagined the imbalance, that the humiliation in Seattle hadn't come out of nowhere. The balance loaded. $247.19. That didn't shock me. What shocked me was how we got there. I scrolled slowly, transaction by transaction, my finger hovering over the trackpad as if moving too fast might make me miss something important. There it was. $5,200, wedding gown. $9,800, venue deposit. $4,100, catering package, including the imported champagne she insisted was non-negotiable. I remembered approving those, wincing, but approving them anyway, telling myself it was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Then the others appeared. $3,400 at Nordstrom, labeled bridal accessories. I clicked. Designer handbags, sunglasses. Nothing bridal about them. My stomach tightened. $2,100, Napa Valley Spa Resort. $3,800, 4 round-trip flights to Miami. 2 under Victoria's name, 2 under names I didn't recognize. I scrolled further back. Dinner at an upscale Seattle restaurant, $1,200. A wedding planning meeting that turned out to be bottle service at a nightclub, $750, personal shopper. $2,300, furniture store. None of it had anything to do with the wedding. My hands started shaking. I pulled out a notebook and began writing totals, my handwriting uneven as the numbers stacked up. Legitimate wedding expenses came to just under $26,000. The rest? Luxury, travel, status. Another $18,000, $44,000. I leaned back in my chair, chest tight, vision blurring as tears finally spilled over. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just silent, stunned tears sliding down my face and dripping onto the notebook. I thought of the double shifts at the hospital, the weekends I'd traded away, the car repairs I'd postponed, the vacation I'd canceled because Victoria needs one more transfer. I'd convinced myself I was helping my sister build her future. Instead, I'd funded a fantasy. I clicked into my email and started cross-referencing receipts Victoria had forwarded me over the past 6 months. A florist deposit? Actually, a leather jacket from All Saints. Invitation printing? A custom jewelry purchase from a boutique in Belltown. It wasn't careless spending. It was deliberate. She hadn't just borrowed from me. She'd lied to me. Over and over. A notification popped up on the screen. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. Victoria's name was attached to an attempted $890 charge at a boutique in Seattle. She hadn't even noticed the account was empty yet. My phone buzzed a second later. Hey, did something happen with the account? My card got declined. No apology, no explanation, just irritation. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I closed the account. Not dramatically, not angrily, just methodically. I transferred the remaining $247.19 into my personal checking account and removed Victoria's access entirely. When the confirmation screen appeared, something inside me steadied. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Diane. I answered from my balcony, the desert sunset painting the sky in burnt orange and violet. "Michaela," she said without preamble, "we need to talk about your sister." My grip tightened on the phone. "What about her?" "She's in serious trouble." Aunt Diane had always been the truth teller in our family, the one who didn't sugarcoat, didn't enable. If she was calling me, it meant the situation was worse than I thought. "She dumped nearly 6 figures into a restaurant venture in Capitol Hill," Diane continued. "It's hemorrhaging money." A restaurant. My mind raced through Victoria's recent Instagram posts. Cocktails, investor meetings, captions about building an empire. I'd assumed it was performative. It wasn't. "She owes over $120,000, Diane said quietly. "High-interest loans, private investors, the kind who don't wait patiently." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "She's been using your money to keep up appearances," Diane added, "to make it look like she's successful while everything collapses." I stood up, pacing the balcony. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because you would have told her it was a terrible idea," Diane replied. "And because she wanted to prove she could be something big without help. Except she still needed your money to fake it." "What happens if she can't pay?" I asked, though I already sensed the answer. "Foreclosure, repossession. And those investors?" Diane paused. "They don't file paperwork through normal channels." My thoughts went to a small pair of hands clutching stuffed animals. "Sophie," I said softly. "Victoria's stepdaughter. 6 years old. Sweet. Innocent." "She doesn't deserve this," I murmured. "No," Diane agreed. "And that's why I'm calling you. Because I know you, Michaela. You'll want to fix this. But you can't save someone who's determined to drown." After we hung up, I sat in the dark as the desert cooled around me. Part of me wanted to call Victoria, demand answers, scream. Another part of me, the part that had stood alone in a luxury hotel lobby, excluded from a dinner she paid for, was done. I wasn't going to rescue her, but I wasn't going to abandon a child either. A week and a half later, my phone lit up at 9 p.m. "Victoria." I answered on the 3rd ring. "Michaela," she cried, panic sharp in her voice. "Thank God. The power's been shut off. The water, too. They're cutting everything." I listened quietly. "I thought you sent money like you always do," she continued. "Sophie's doing homework by candlelight. I can't explain this to a 6-year-old. Then her tone shifted, softer, familiar. "Remember when we were kids," she said, "those nights on the roof? You promised family never abandons family." My hand tightened around the phone. "I remember Seattle," I said evenly. "You said just immediate family." Silence. "You spent $44,000 of my money," I continued, "and lied about it. How did you—" "I checked the account," I said. "I saw everything." She started crying. "I was going to pay you back." "With what?" I asked. When she tried to pivot to Sophie again, I interrupted gently but firmly. "Figure it out, Victoria," I said. "You're an adult." Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, not with doubt, but with relief. 10 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. Victoria had gone public, and I knew this story was far from over. I didn't open Instagram right away. The notifications stacked up so fast, my phone buzzed nonstop on the kitchen counter, vibrating itself inch by inch toward the edge like it was trying to escape. I knew, before I saw a single post, exactly what Victoria was doing. She'd always understood optics better than accountability. When I finally unlocked my phone, it was already too late. Her most recent post filled the screen. A photo of Sophie sitting on the living room floor, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, the room behind her lit only by candlelight. Her expression wasn't dramatic, just confused. Too young to understand why the lights were gone. Too young to understand why adults lie. The caption made my stomach drop. Some people care more about money than family. My own sister turned her back on us when we needed her most. Won't even help her own niece have electricity. Guess I know where I stand now. Hashtag family first. Hashtag betrayed. Hashtag heartbroken. She tagged me. By the time I scrolled, there were already hundreds of comments. How could you do this to a child? Disgusting. Family is family no matter what. Money changes people. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to post screenshots, to upload bank statements and receipts and every carefully labeled lie Victoria had fed me for months. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I stopped. Public truth wars don't end with truth winning. They end with everyone muddy, exhausted, and damaged. And Victoria was already drowning. I wasn't going to jump in after her. I took screenshots for my own protection, then put the phone face down on the counter and sat on the floor with my back against the cabinets, breathing slowly until the tightness in my chest eased. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. Sharp, hesitant, real. When I opened it, Trevor stood there, Victoria's husband. He looked nothing like the polished man I'd seen in engagement photos. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't shaved. He looked broken. "Michaela," he said quietly, "I'm sorry to show up like this. I had to come." I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the kitchen table in silence for a moment. He glanced around my apartment, the mismatched chairs, the chipped mug rack, the quiet normalcy of it all. "I saw Victoria's posts," he finally said. "I told her to take them down." I said nothing. "She refused," he added. "Said you deserved it." My jaw tightened, but I stayed quiet. "I didn't know," Trevor said, voice thick. "About the money, the wedding. She told me we were splitting costs, that she had savings." My eyes flicked up. "She never told you?" He shook his head. "I found out last week, when I started going through our finances, trying to figure out why everything was collapsing. I saw the statements from the joint account." He swallowed hard. "Michaela, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault," I said quietly. "The restaurant was her idea," he continued. "She convinced me it was a smart investment, said she had experience. I trusted her." "You trusted your wife," I said. "That doesn't make you stupid." He exhaled shakily. "I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "The lies, the debt, the way she's treating you, it's not healthy. It's not safe." My heart ached, not for Victoria, but for the man sitting across from me and the child sleeping somewhere in a dark apartment. "How's Sophie handling all this?" I asked. Trevor's voice cracked. "She's scared. She doesn't understand why the lights keep going out or why her mom's always angry. I try to shield her, but..." He trailed off. "I came to thank you," he said after a moment, "for everything you did. Victoria might not appreciate it, but I do." I believed him. After he left, I sat alone again, staring at the door long after it closed. I wasn't going back into Victoria's orbit, but I couldn't ignore Sophie. That night, I called Trevor. "I want to help Sophie," I said, "and I'll help you get stable. But Victoria doesn't touch a single dollar." I heard the relief in his exhale. "Thank you," he said. "Really." We talked logistics. I'd set up a separate account strictly for Sophie's needs. Tuition paid directly to her preschool, clothes, supplies, no cash transfers, no access for Victoria. "I also have a friend in Seattle," I added. "She works in supply chain management. Her company's hiring. I'll send you her contact info." "That would mean everything," Trevor said. "One condition," I said firmly. "Victoria can't know. If she does, she'll manipulate it. You have my word." After we hung up, I transferred $2,000 into the new account. Not a fortune, but enough to stabilize Sophie's immediate needs. Then I opened my safe. Grandma's bracelet lay inside, emeralds catching the light, diamonds scattering tiny rainbows across the wall. It had survived migrations, betrayals, and generations of women who knew when to endure and when to walk away. Victoria wanted it as a symbol of status. She never understood what it really meant. I closed the safe. The bracelet would stay with me. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt quietly. No announcements, no declarations. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. Started having coffee with friends I'd neglected. took long hikes in the desert just to remember how to breathe again. At work, one of the nurses smiled at me during lunch. "You seem lighter," she said. "I set boundaries," I replied. "Turns out they help." Trevor sent updates. Sophie was doing better. Preschool tuition paid, interview scheduled. Victoria stayed silent, except online. But engagement dropped. People started asking questions. The narrative cracked. 3 months later, Trevor texted me, "Sophie drew you something. Can I mail it?" When the envelope arrived, I cried. 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. Auntie Kay and me, written in uneven crayon. That same week, Aunt Diane called. Victoria lost the house. The restaurant closed. Most of her friends disappeared. I waited for vindication. It never came. Just sadness for the sister I used to have. One evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "This is Victoria. I need to talk." I stared at the message. Then I put the phone down and opened my laptop instead, scrolling through photos from my painting class. Imperfect, honest, mine. My life wasn't flawless, but it was finally my own, and that was enough. For a while, it felt like my name didn't belong to me anymore. Every time I opened my phone, there it was, attached to accusations, half-truths, and carefully cropped images designed to make one thing clear. Victoria was the victim, and I was the villain who had abandoned family. I didn't engage. That decision cost me more than I expected. An old cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a message that read, "I don't know the full story, but this feels cruel." A former high school friend commented publicly, "There are 2 sides to every story, but children shouldn't suffer." Each message landed like a small cut. I drafted responses I never sent, paragraphs explaining bank statements, screenshots annotated with dates and totals. I imagined the relief of finally being believed. But belief earned through public warfare comes at a price, and I wasn't willing to pay it. Instead, I focused on what was real, what I could control. Every Wednesday evening, I drove across town to the community center for my watercolor class. The room always smelled faintly of paper and paint, and the instructor, an elderly woman with silver hair and paint-stained fingers, never asked questions. I liked that. I liked being just another woman learning how to blend colors, not someone's sister, not a villain in a story I hadn't written. At home, my boyfriend Daniel noticed the change before I did. He'd been patient through the entire ordeal, listening without interrupting, never pushing me to react the way he might have. One night, as we sat on the couch eating takeout, he set his fork down and studied me. "You're quieter," he said gently, "but not in a bad way." "I feel like I finally stopped running," I replied. He nodded. "Good. Because you don't owe anyone exhaustion." Daniel never met Victoria. That had always been intentional on my part, though I hadn't admitted it even to myself. Some instinct had warned me not to blend those worlds. Now I was grateful I'd listened. Trevor kept his word. Victoria never found out about the account I'd set up for Sophie. Tuition was paid directly. Supplies delivered to the preschool. New shoes showed up at Trevor's door with no return address. Sophie sent voice notes sometimes, short, shy recordings where she told me about a picture she colored or a story she liked. Each one reminded me why I'd drawn the line exactly where I had. Helping a child wasn't the same as enabling her mother. Online, the tide began to shift. Slowly, quietly. People noticed inconsistencies. Someone commented asking why Victoria hadn't downsized sooner. Another asked why she'd posted photos at a rooftop bar only days before claiming she couldn't afford electricity. Victoria responded defensively at first, then less often, then not at all. The posts stopped. One afternoon, Aunt Diane called again. "She's moving into a studio apartment," she said. "Not a nice one." I closed my eyes. "I don't feel relieved," I admitted. "That's because you're not cruel," Diane replied. "But don't mistake sadness for responsibility. Her consequences aren't yours to absorb." That night, I took Grandma's bracelet out of the safe again. I turned it slowly in my hands, tracing the worn clasp, imagining all the women who'd held it before me. Women who'd loved deeply, who'd given too much, who'd learned, eventually, where generosity ended and self-erasure began. Victoria had wanted it to complete her image. I wanted it to remind me who I was. Weeks passed. Daniel and I planned a short trip to Sedona. Nothing extravagant, just red rocks, early mornings, and quiet dinners. The kind of trip that felt like recovery, not escape. On the last night before we left, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. "This is Victoria. Please, I need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to know what version of the story she'd try this time. Another part already knew. I didn't block the number. I didn't respond either. Instead, I turned my phone face down and leaned back against Daniel's shoulder. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said after a moment. "I just finally understand something." "What's that?" "That silence isn't cruelty," I replied. "Sometimes it's closure." The desert trip was exactly what I needed. Long hikes, clear skies, space. I found myself laughing more easily, sleeping better, breathing deeper. When we returned, there was an envelope waiting in my mailbox. Inside was another drawing from Sophie. This one showed 3 figures, one tall, one small, one with long hair standing a little apart, but smiling. Trevor had included a short note. "I got the job. We're moving next month. Just me and Sophie. Thank you for helping us reset." I pressed the drawing flat against my refrigerator, right next to the first one. At work, I picked up extra shifts, not out of obligation, but intention. For the first time, the money I earned felt like it belonged to my future, not someone else's illusion. I started planning a longer trip. Costa Rica. Something I'd talked myself out of for years. "You should do it," Daniel said when I told him. "You've earned a life that doesn't feel like damage control." He was right. One evening, as the Phoenix sunset washed the sky in amber and violet, my phone buzzed again. Same number. No message this time. Just a missed call. I watched it disappear from the screen. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel tempted. I felt finished. Victoria had shown me who she was, not once, but repeatedly, and I had finally believed her. Family, I'd learned, wasn't about blood or shared childhoods or promises whispered under desert stars. It was about mutual respect, accountability, love that didn't require self-destruction. As the night air cooled, I stepped onto my balcony with a glass of wine and looked out over the city lights. I wasn't whole because I'd won. I was whole because I'd walked away. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was unfamiliar at first, like stepping into a room after the music stops and realizing you can finally hear your own thoughts. For years, my emotional energy had been spent anticipating Victoria's needs, smoothing over her mistakes, bracing for the next crisis. Without that constant hum of urgency, I didn't know what to do with myself. So I started small. I rearranged my apartment, moved the couch closer to the window, hung my watercolor paintings on the wall, even the uneven ones, especially the uneven ones. They reminded me that progress didn't need permission to be displayed. At work, I picked up extra shifts, not to bail anyone out, but to build something that belonged to me. A savings account with no guilt attached. A future that didn't feel borrowed. Daniel noticed the shift in me before anyone else. "You're different," he said one night as we cooked dinner together, his hands steady as he chopped vegetables. "Not lighter exactly, more anchored." "I stopped explaining myself," I replied. "It turns out that frees up a lot of space." He smiled. "Good, because you don't owe the world a justification for your boundaries." Trevor kept sending updates, always respectful, never asking for more than we'd agreed on. Sophie was thriving. She liked her new preschool. She'd made a friend named Lily who shared her obsession with penguins. Trevor sent a photo of her on her first day, hair neatly braided, backpack nearly as big as she was, smiling with the kind of uncomplicated joy that made my chest ache. I saved the photo. The account I'd set up for her remained untouched by drama. Tuition paid, supplies delivered, stability restored, not through grand gestures, but through consistency. Victoria, on the other hand, faded, not dramatically. Not with the apology some part of me once hoped for. She simply disappeared. Aunt Diane filled in the gaps when I asked. The foreclosure went through. The studio apartment was small, loud, and far from the image Victoria had cultivated online. The restaurant officially closed, leaving debts that couldn't be outrun with filters or captions. Her friends scattered. The ones who'd cheered the loudest during her rise vanished quietly when there was nothing left to celebrate. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt grief. Not for who Victoria had become, but for who I thought she was. The girl who linked pinkies with me under desert stars. The sister who promised we'd always choose each other. I mourned her the way you mourn someone who's still alive but unreachable. One afternoon, as I cleaned out the hall closet, I found an old shoebox tucked behind winter coats. Inside were photos. Victoria and me as kids. Matching Halloween costumes, road trips, birthdays. Proof that the bond had once been real, or at least felt real. I sat on the floor and let myself cry. Not because I wanted her back, but because letting go deserved its own moment of honesty. That evening, I opened the safe again. Grandma's bracelet rested exactly where I'd left it. I fastened it around my wrist and held it up to the light. The emeralds caught the glow of the lamp, scattering green reflections across the wall. This bracelet had never been about weddings. It had been about survival, about knowing when to carry others and when to carry yourself. I took it off carefully and placed it back in the safe, not as something hidden, but as something protected. 2 weeks later, Daniel and I booked the Costa Rica trip. No elaborate itinerary, just open days, early mornings, and space to breathe. When the confirmation email came through, I felt something shift inside me, like I'd finally allowed myself to plan joy without bracing for interruption. At the hospital, one of the younger nurses asked me for advice during a late shift. "How do you know when to stop helping someone?" she asked quietly. I thought about it for a moment. "When helping starts to cost you your sense of self," I said. "That's usually the line." She nodded like the answer mattered. It did. One evening, as I watered the plants on my balcony, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message followed. "It's Victoria. Please, I just want to talk." I read it once, then again. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel curiosity. I felt clarity. I typed a response, then erased it. I wasn't responsible for her closure. I set the phone down and watched the sky deepen into shades of purple and gold. The desert breeze was warm, steady, grounding. Inside, Sophie's drawings hung on my refrigerator. 2 figures holding hands. A sun drawn too big for the page. Hope unburdened by adult expectations. Trevor texted later that night. "We're moving into the new place tomorrow. Sophie's excited. Thank you again. For everything," I replied simply. "I'm glad she's safe." That was the truth of it. Weeks turned into months. My life filled itself, not with noise, but with intention. Painting classes, weekend hikes, conversations that didn't revolve around crisis management, love that felt reciprocal instead of draining. I learned something I wish I'd known sooner. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. They let the right people in and keep the chaos out. On my last night before leaving for Costa Rica, I stood on my balcony again, glass of wine in hand, city lights flickering below. I thought about everything I'd lost, then about everything I'd gained. Peace, self-respect, a future that didn't require self-sacrifice as proof of love. I raised my glass to the quiet. "To new beginnings," I whispered. And for the first time in a long time, the words didn't feel fragile. They felt earned.